As you know, we have Craig Merrill, who is the director of the MBA program here. He got his undergrad here at BYU, and he got his master's degree and his PhD from the University of Pennsylvania. He's going to talk about how to be successful in your career, and we'll just turn the time over to you.
Thanks. Thanks. So I want to make two invitations. One is close your laptops. Close them up. And then the other is, we're slim in numbers. Could I get everyone to come down somewhere below the projector? And I'll just tell you, I appreciate you doing that. It's more for my sake than anything else. Part of it is I can only see about that far, and so it makes me feel like I'm not just talking to empty chairs. But the other is, with the laptops closed, I've seen over the years in the classrooms, there's no clearer way to communicate disinterest than having a laptop open. And so I throw that out because you're going to have visitors here from time to time. And I want you to be aware of that. So Kim asked me to come talk with you, not really so much as the MBA director. I'm a member of the finance faculty. I teach derivatives. I've done a lot of consulting with Wall Street firms and other financial institutions. I've been around the hiring of undergraduates and the developing of a career path in finance for a lot of years. So yeah, we're going to use the MBA program as a mechanism for conversation, but this really isn't explicitly about MBA, and it's definitely not just about BYU's MBA. The things that you can do to be a really good MBA applicant, it turns out, will also make you a really good candidate for each of the professional opportunities that you'd like to have. And that's really where I want to kind of focus our conversation today. And as we go through the conversation, I don't want to just leave Q&A to the end. You know, if something comes up and you'd like to talk about, you know, a particular topic along the way, just stop me. Let's have a conversation as we go through this. So let's think a little bit about career paths for just a minute. I remember well sitting in this room, and it tells you this room's been around a long time, at the same stage that you're at right now, and trying to figure out, where am I headed? What am I was an econ undergrad, but I remember being fascinated by finance as well, because the two disciplines are really tightly linked, and trying to figure out where I'm headed. And a lot of the decision making, I thought, had to do with what's the right career path. Let me just ask you, I'm curious, how many of you kind of have a sense that there are certain career paths, certain jobs, that if you get those jobs, you'll be a better candidate for whatever's next, including MBA? You think there's best jobs out there? What would those be? Any others? Asset management, consulting. Okay. I'm glad you threw that one in there, because often, I don't know why it is, but we get this sort of stars in our eyes and we think, man, I got to be an investment banker or my life's over and I'll never have an opportunity in my career. I've watched admissions at really good MBA programs, and I've watched hiring at really good companies, and there's something that they're looking for more than that first job on your resume, and it has more to do with who you are and what you make of an opportunity than the particular job you land. Now, don't get me wrong, if you want to be an investment banker, the best first job you can get is investment banking. But if that's not your ultimate goal, I'm not quite sure why you want to be an investment banker. What you're really looking for is to be good at something. And to be good at something, you've got to love it. You've got to have some passion for it. Does anyone remember Elder Eyring's story, President Eyring, about why he didn't become a scientist? Yeah, he goes to his dad with a math question for a science class. and his dad gives him a couple of hints, trying to be a good teacher. As teachers, we like to do that. We like to give you some hints and see what you do with it. He gave him some hints on this math problem, and a little while later he says, "So Henry, have you figured that math problem out?" And he goes, "No, I haven't gotten to it yet," or something like that. And his father just looked sad, and he said, "Wow, I can't believe you don't think about that when you don't have anything else you have to think about." And that actually got President Eyring going on, what is it I'm excited enough about that I would think about it when I don't have to? Now, there's limits to this. I'm a photographer. That's what I really wish I could make a living at. But it turns out that's a tough place to make a living. And the thing I like sort of second best is financial models. I really like derivative pricing. And so I look at photography and derivative pricing, and I really enjoy both of them. So professionally, I do the one I can make a living at. And then when I'm out hiking and traveling and things like that, I do the other one. And it's kind of fun. But you got to love it. You got to be interested enough that you can actually develop some technical skills and some capability, something that will differentiate you. In that first job, they're looking for you to bring something to the table where you're really good, and they're glad you're there. And so you've got to find something that you're interested enough in that you're not just getting through the classes and satisfying the bare minimum requirements, but you're actually really engaged and differentiating yourself for your technical skills. The goal in that first job is to get noticed, to have someone say, "Oh my goodness, you're good. Let me give you more to do." And then you're off and running. Now, I say this is a little bit of hyperbole, but we've had a number of students who've applied for admission to MBA programs who say, "Look at this, I've got Goldman Sachs on my resume." And they've been there 3.5 years, and they've held one position, the same position, for those 3.5 years. And then we get people who apply who started as, and this is the hyperbole, a fry cook at McDonald's, but 3 years later, they're running all of the stores in the district. Now, again, that's a little extreme, but we do see those kind of qualitative comparisons where someone didn't start with the best job, but over a 3-year period, they leveraged it into something way beyond what you'd ever expect such a start to turn into. Now, if you had the choice between someone who landed a great job and never advanced, or someone who didn't land a great job but advanced like crazy, which one are you more interested in 3 or 4 years out? Yeah, it's the one who's showing the character they have in the opportunities that they have. So, don't believe that your life is determined by that first job. Yeah, it can be an advantage, but it's an advantage that then sets a bar for what you do with it moving forward from there. And that's really where you're going to make your next opportunities and what you do with that first position. Does someone notice you? Do they say, "Wow, you're good. I'd like to give you more responsibility"? There's sort of a conventional wisdom in the world, and that is, when you want something done, you give it to the busy person. Now, why would that be? That's why they're busy. They're getting stuff done. Someone who's sitting in their office playing cards or some kind of computer game is not likely the one you want to hand an important project to. I had one really interesting example. I was doing a consulting project for a life insurance company, and we needed to do a financial economic valuation of a life insurance product, which means we needed to understand mortality tables. So we had 2 analysts working in the firm. One of them was an NYU grad, the other was an Amherst grad. And we said, "Okay, we need mortality tables for this project." So they both go out and come back. The first one came back. He's a young man. I have to think about his name. He came back and he said, "Okay, there's male mortality tables, female mortality tables, smoker and non-smoker, here you go." Okay, cool, thanks. The other one, her name was Carol. She came back and said, "Here's how mortality tables are constructed. They've been updated in 84, 88, 2000, 2002. She had the sequence of tables. There's smoker, non-smoker, male, female, annuity buyer, life insurance buyer. Did you know this, that if you buy an annuity, you live longer than if you buy life insurance? People who buy life insurance die sooner. Did you know that? it makes sense after I think about it. Why would people who buy life insurance die sooner? They have an incentive. Does buying the insurance cause you to die, or is it the other way around? It turns out people know that they're more likely to die early, and they buy insurance. And if they know from family history that they're more likely to live a long time, they buy annuities. And so there's information in the purchase. So she comes and teaches me all of this, and then we go on with the project. Now, which of those two do you think got the next important assignment? Yeah, the one whose name I remember now, all these years later. You're looking to be noticed, not as a bright A student. An A student does nothing more than give back what they're asked. You're looking to be noticed for being a contributor of value, for someone who does a little more than they're asked, for someone who's got a little more capability, who makes more out of whatever opportunity you've had. And as those things are noticed, you have expanded responsibilities. And as your responsibilities expand, your need for business training might expand. This is something you'll see over and over again as you go through your career. There are people who get hired for a narrow set of technical skills. Their ability to build a spreadsheet, a financial model, to do some analysis, to have an understanding of a particular set of markets, whatever it might be. But if that narrow set of abilities gets you the opportunity to advance, now you're going to start managing people, you're going to have to do hiring and firing, you're going to have to understand something about generating business, retaining new clients, et cetera, et cetera. And your need for training will expand, and then you might say, you know what, now it's time for a full-time MBA. I'm going to pause from what I'm doing, I'm going to go get an MBA, and I'm going to really make the most of it. Now, one of the most common questions that I get is, how much work experience do I need to get into an MBA program? What's wrong with that question? Okay, it's about quality, not quantity. That's a very good insight. What else? Yeah. How do I get an A? All I want's an A. Your goal isn't to get into an MBA program. The MBA program is a means to an end. It's not an end in and of itself. And so before you even apply to an MBA program, it's really a great idea to know where you want to go with an MBA and why you need the MBA. And if you know why you need the MBA, you know why you're applying to the program you're applying to. And if you know why you're applying to the program you're applying to, you know how to write your essay so that it's compelling and you get in. That makes sense? So the reason for work experience before an MBA isn't because it's a barrier to entry. If all we wanted was more students, we'd just use the GMAT and GPA and admit everyone as quickly as we could and get your tuition money from you and send you on your way. But that's not why MBA programs exist. There's a certain amount of just experience that you need to see how things work in a business setting before you're ready for what the MBA program is built to offer. And what you'll find is that when you get into an MBA, the classroom is a very different place. Right now in your classrooms, you are surrounded by some incredibly bright students. I mean, think about it. You had to get into BYU, which already said you were in the top, 5% of everyone who goes to college. And then you had to get into the Marriott School, and you had to be selected into the finance major. That says something about you. That says something about your capabilities and about how you've performed in college. And it's to be admired. But when you get into an MBA program, in addition to having the intellect of a good student, you've got years of experience. And in those classrooms, when the professor says, well, what about this topic? Someone's going to say, well, at my firm, we did the following. And someone else is going to say, you know, we tried that too, but we ran into this problem, and so we did this other thing. And pretty soon you've got this really rich conversation where the value of the classroom isn't the topic, it's not the textbook, it's not uniquely the professor, it is the colleagues that you're among and how you make each other better. And so the reason I think you ought to choose an MBA program is there's a group of people who share the same passion you do for a particular area of business, and you want to be among those people, and you want to be better because of it. And you want that to be your network as you advance your career. Does that make sense? And so when you get to that point, that's what I think you're looking for in an MBA. Now, there's a number of opportunities in today's world to skip the MBA. And you'll find an increasing number of firms that are willing to give you in-house training and promote you without an MBA. And you may decide, I don't need to do that at year 3, year 4, year 5. But then as your career evolves, you may find yourself, 5, 10, 15 years down the road, and your career has moved to an area where maybe you've moved into an early stage business, you're a senior manager in a new company, and you've got responsibilities that you never had to think about before. That may be the time when you're thinking, okay, I got to get some schooling along the way, and you look at executive programs. And then you're looking at something that's nearby, that's accessible to you given where you live and the time commitments that you have. And let me just warn you this. Most executive programs exist to bring revenue into the university. Okay? They don't exist for you. They exist for the school. And so as you look at executive programs, make sure it's a program that will actually make you better at what you want to be good at, not just one that will charge you a lot for an MBA. And in today's world, business schools have shrinking budgets. They are milking professional and executive MBA programs. Be very cautious. We've been looking at how schools do rankings, and we just discovered that Northwestern University, among others, admits low GMAT students in the spring so that they don't have to count them in their averages for the fall, so that their statistics still look good. And then students who don't place well, they just remove them from the group that are listed as seeking placement so that their placement statistics look good. There's immense competition and pressure among MBA programs right now. Don't trust the surface level claims. Talk to students, talk to recruiters, find out which programs are actually doing the things that you want to have happen in your experience. Now, what was it, a couple weeks ago that Kim went through this? Kim went through a discussion with you that's based on something I do with the MBAs, and it has to do with your personal brand. It has to do with you knowing what you're known for. And I think he showed you some pictures like this. Do you remember this conversation? Okay. Very focused brand. Porsche knows exactly who they are, who they're building for, how their customer is going to respond to every change they make. Ferrari, you couldn't even order one of these in the first year that what is this? This is the 458 Italia came out. In order to get one of these, you had to have already bought a Ferrari. So one of my former students, it's so funny, we're the same age. I was a new professor, he was an MBA student, and we met 20 years ago in the classroom. He was one of the few who actually succeeded during the dot-com boom. He sold 3 companies before the bubble burst and made liquid all of that supposedly fake value during the dot-com bubble. And he's on his 6th Ferrari, I think. He got a call to buy one of these because he's a regular customer. And they're like, well, is there anything in particular you'd like us to do with this car? How could we make it more appealing to you? They're very aware of who their customer is and how to make that customer happy. This one, I hope Kim talked to you about this. This one's got no focus to the brand. I mean, this could be anything from driving kids to school to a rap singer who doesn't like the wheels to stop when he stops, right? I mean, this one's all over the place. Any of you watch Top Gear? BBC? Remember James May driving a Cadillac and he's just appalled at this thing? Okay? This is a problem. But, I mean, like it or not, you have a brand. You don't get to decide whether you have a brand. You have one. Every one of you, in each choice that you make, are determining your brand. And so as you sit in an interview, have you read the book Blink? How many of you have read that? Oh my goodness, put that on your list. If you're gonna be well-read in the business literature, you've got to read Blink. How long do you have in your interview to actually determine the outcome? If even that. Yeah. Basically, the other 20 to 30 minutes of the interview is just the interviewer trying to see if their first impression was right. And you've got to understand that in all of your interactions, you're creating a brand. You create a brand that is interested, engaged, capable, or disinterested, full of yourself, thoughtless, or not. It's all of your interactions communicate something about you. And it's not just the person in front of the interview or the room in the class or whatever, or in the info session. It's the people around you as well. Everyone in this room is part of your potential network. And they're watching. They're watching to see if you're a back of the room heckler or a front of the room suck up. Or are you a really valuable contributor to every conversation? Do you come prepared? You're always being evaluated, and you don't get a choice in that. Some people just try to thrive on someone else's brand. This is the Honda Insight, right? Honda couldn't sell a hybrid until they made it look like a Toyota. And so they do better looking like someone else's idea. He probably talked to you about some people. And I don't believe that President Monson set out to create a brand. I don't think he's got brand managers who are doing market research on how he can be a more appealing president of the church. But you've got a reaction to him, a reaction that's formed over years of observing him. How many of you know someone that when they walk in the room, you kind of cringe and figure out how you're going to get out of the room? Do you know that person? Okay, don't be that person. But you're creating that impression with everything that you do. Now, you're part of this brand. What's your impression of this one? What comes to mind when you see this? Go ahead. Pardon? Cheap tuition, yep. The Walmart special. Integrity, yep. Ethics. I tell you what, that one cuts both ways. Don't ever claim to be ethical. It's kind of like putting up a tall, narrow pedestal and then standing on top of it, and everyone just wants to knock you off of it. Others will grant us this ethics brand. Live up to it. Be aware of it. Understand that if one of you works for Enron and misstates financials, all of us take a black eye. It's a wonderful brand to have, but it's a responsibility as well. What else comes to mind with this? Sober. Yeah. How many of you are married? Do you associate family-friendly with this? I had an interesting experience as an undergraduate. I always had the perception that professors weren't terribly sympathetic toward, oh, professor, we're having a baby. What if I miss class? Yeah, everyone's having babies. You're responsible for the class. I got to the University of Pennsylvania and said, hey, we're having our first child. What should I do if by chance I miss class? And every one of my professors sat back and said, oh, man, I remember when we had our first child. It was so great. No worries. Just let me know. We'll work with you. Okay, this is family friendly. I like this. So Wharton, family friendly. But I also know that our MBA program here at BYU gets very high marks for being family friendly in the student and alumni surveys. Okay, let me ask you this. Who's responsible for this brand? Us? Do you include yourself? How so? Yeah. Anyone have any idea what the fail rate is for undergraduates in our college? Meaning that you don't get a degree and leave with a degree? Anyone know? What's your perception? Is it like half the class fails out? Any ideas? Is it closer to 5%? Yeah. Yeah. I'm guessing of those who are, and I think this is pretty close, of those who are admitted to a major in the Marriott School, the ones who don't finish and fail and go away is probably in the 5% range. By the time you've gotten to where we're admitting you, we're pretty confident in you. And if you'll do the work, you're going to make it. So in a sense, once we've admitted you to the finance major, you are us. Graduation is just a matter of, keep working, and you'll get there. But we are linked together. Our reputation, everyone who's gone ahead of you and graduated and left here, is your reputation. And you've been admitted because there's a group of faculty who looked at you and said, you know what, you belong. And we're pleased to have you be part of our brand and our brand be part of you. Now, if I were talking with the MBAs, I'd go on and talk about BYU MBA, but I'm going to defer this because we're really not talking BYU MBA recruiting here today. So the question becomes, what's your brand? What are you going to be known for? Your finance students, I like to put it in this sort of terminology. Can you articulate your value proposition? If I were to just sit down with each of you and say, in 30 seconds, who are you and what are you good at? Could you do it? Now, maybe not quite yet. Maybe you're not there yet because you're still sort of hunting and trying to decide what's your thing and what are you going to be great at, and you haven't had all of your classes yet to either learn what you're going to be great at or confirm what you think you're going to be great at. But this is where you ought to be headed. I know with our MBA students, by the time they get through orientation, they ought to be able to give what we call an elevator pitch. If you run into an executive who you'd like to work for, in the time you're on an elevator, you ought to be able to convince that executive that you deserve a conversation. And it really comes down to this. Can you communicate what you're good at in just a few short sentences? To do that, you have to actually be good at something. Getting through an interview is not about just having the right answers. I mean, think about every interview that you have been or ever will be in. Can I borrow your piece of paper for just a second? When you go into the room, there's going to be an executive sitting in the front of the room who's going to be sitting in a chair, leaning back with their legs crossed, looking at your resume. Odds are, that's the first moment they've actually taken a good look at your resume because someone handed it to them and said, hey, interview this person. And so as you walk in the room and they say, so, Amy, tell me about yourself. There it is. The interview is yours to win in that moment. And it's not, well, you know, I'm from Podunk, Utah, and grew up riding horses with my family, and let me tell you about my cousin. And, you know, it's not literally tell me about yourself, okay? This is like a presidential debate question. It really doesn't matter what the question was. Your answer is, you know, hi, I'm Amy Beck, and I'm here because. And you've got sort of 2 or 3 sentences to say, I know who I am, I know who you are, and I know why this is a good fit. Does that make sense? And so what you're trying to do is you're just trying to get that interviewer to go from leaning back and uninterested to leaning forward and saying, tell me more about this, because now they're intrigued, and they want you working for them. And to do that, you've got to have something that you are legitimately good at. Something where you've paid the price to know more than other applicants and to make the recruiter say, wow, you understand my company, you understand what you're excited about, and you're going to make us better when you come work here. I read an article this morning about career searches for financial analysts. And the question that was asked was, how do I break into being an analyst? And the answer, I think, is a really, really good one, and it applies to all career paths. Is there some tangible evidence of what you're claiming to be good at? Do you have data or just bold assertions? A lot of resumes are filled with bold assertions and no supporting actual experience or data. So you've got things like the on-campus internship, the summer internships. You've got even part-time jobs or service activities within the college. There's many places where you can exhibit leadership, influence, analytical skills. This particular article suggested if you want to be an analyst, write some analyst reports. And then walk in with one of those in your hand or in your briefcase ready to go. And when someone asks you, you know, what makes you think you can be an analyst, say, well, here's the latest analyst report I wrote, and let me just show you a few things. And let that speak for your capabilities. So, again, this isn't just about becoming an MBA. It's about getting promoted. It's about having expanded opportunities, about moving to the next company that you want to move to. You've got to be really good at something, and you've got to be able to articulate it and support it. that great? I mean, look, when someone's interviewing you, if you show up and you know the name of the company, but not much more, you're never going to impress. If you've at least looked at the website and you know what the company says publicly about themselves, you'll at least not embarrass yourself. But if you show up and you've dug into the company's financials and you know who the competitors are and you've done some analysis that differentiates you from others, then all of a sudden you're hireable. And so, the goal of networking, and is that your next topic, Amy, is networking? The goal of networking is to really get to where you know the industry, you know the current issues, you know the vocabulary, you know who the players are, what the challenges are, and you're able to speak articulately about those things and have someone say, wow, this person's not a risk to hire because they're already, I don't know if it's up the learning curve or down the learning curve, I always forget that, but they're somewhere along the learning curve. I always think of it as climbing because you have to work hard to get, but I think you actually slide down a learning curve in the literature. But what you want to demonstrate is you're a low-risk hire or a low-risk admit. Okay, here at BYU, we think there's some relevance of faith to your professional life. One of the things that I love is as I watch students come back from getting some work experience, and then our alumni come back from their careers and their growth as executives and the experiences that they have. As you go through life, you find more and more evidence that faith is relevant to professional life. I'll just tell you, I do exit interviews with our students, and one of my very favorite comments from one of our graduates, we had a woman from India who came here to study because her husband was a doctor working at the University of Utah. And so we were fortunate enough to get her. She's just outstandingly qualified. And I asked her about her experience in this area, and she says, you know what I love about BYU is I came here as a Hindu, and I leave here believing in God, and I will be a better Hindu throughout my life. And I thought, isn't that awesome? This is a place, it's not uniquely about Mormonism. But in the Marriott School, this is a place where we actually believe that our faith and our profession go hand in hand, and they feed on each other. We're better in our faith because of our professional life. We're better in our professional life because of our faith. And this idea builds on something that was said over 40 years ago by Spencer W. Kimball. At the 100th anniversary of BYU, he talked to the university community about the next 100 years. And he says, your double heritage and dual concerns with the secular and the spiritual require you to be bilingual. As LDS scholars, you must speak with authority and excellence to your professional colleagues in the language of scholarship, or in the professional language. And you must also be literate in the language of spiritual things. We must be more bilingual in that sense to fulfill the promise in the 2nd century of BYU. You're going to go out into the workplace, and you're going to be put in situations where you think there might be a right or a wrong decision to make. And this is not unique to BYU or to your grad school application, but other graduate schools, companies that you'll work for, they are looking for people of character who will make a difference. But it's not like Sunday school. You can't just say to the group, well, say your prayers, read your scriptures, you'll know this is right. We sort of find that satisfying in Sunday school. In the workplace, you need to have a really good idea of what is right and an ability to articulate it in the language of the profession and in the language of value creation. And if you can do that, you will be amazed at the opportunities for influence that you have, because the world is hungry for values-based financial value creation. And you have the opportunity to be real contributors there. And again, this can be a differentiating characteristic for you. So, preparing. You may or may not pursue an MBA, okay? But regardless of whether you do, if you pretend like you're going to and approach your career that way, you'll do better in your career. Every professional setting that you're in is an interview for the next opportunity. Don't ever think that there is a truly casual interaction that doesn't matter. When you're networking with BYU alumni, they are evaluating you. Yes, they want you to succeed. Yes, they're very willing mentors. And yes, you can ask some questions that are a little more candid and maybe a little dumber than you'd ask to someone else. But that's good. We're there for each other in that way. But remember that in every interaction you're being evaluated, and they're thinking, would I ever recommend this person to my firm? Okay, so remember, every opportunity that you're in is an interview for the next one. If someone gives you an assignment at work and you do it quick and dirty and just the minimum necessary, that's now what you're perceived to be, and that will affect the next opportunity you're given. If you're given an assignment and you genuinely come back and add value through what you do, that becomes who you're known for. So, I mean, one of the greatest opportunities that you have is before you go out and try to represent yourself in the school outside of BYU, you have the chance as juniors to go to the seniors who have maybe done an internship and practice your approach and have them give you some feedback. Because here in-house, we're all invested in making sure that we all go out and represent well. Don't ever go out and try to represent yourself or BYU without first practicing here where it's safe and you can polish your approach. I thought I'd said that wrong. I had to stop and reread it. Look for opportunities to grow your responsibility, your sphere of influence, your opportunities to grow and to learn, but always measure your impact because data speak very loudly. You always want to be able to measure how much impact you've had in order to be really credible. I worked in a consulting firm that had terrible political infighting between practice groups. And one of the greatest lessons I learned is revenue makes you invulnerable. If you generate revenue for the firm in that setting, none of the politics matter because no one can touch you because you're generating revenue. You've got to know the metrics of success in your discipline and be able to show that you are succeeding in adding value to the firm. And then politics fade into the background. Now, not completely. We can't be naive about this, but just understand you need to be able to know how you're growing, how you're learning, how you're adding value, and to be able to demonstrate that. You may decide to get an MBA 3 or 4 years out. There's really not much use in waiting longer than that. But in those 3 or 4 years, you ought to be able to show at least 1, maybe 2 promotions, maybe a move from one firm to another that shows you're moving in some direction. And you ought to have a really credible path that you can describe where you say, look, here's where I started, here's why I moved to the next thing, here's why I moved to the next thing, and here's why I'm getting the MBA in order to get to where I want to get. If you can do that, you open up a lot of doors. It may be that you don't get an MBA at that 3 or 4 year stage. It may be that 5, 6, 10 years down the road, an executive degree may make more sense at that point. We've got a lot of information on our website. I'd invite you to go and take a look there if that's of help to you. I get this question a lot, and this is like the one thing I'll say specifically about BYU's MBA. What's the value proposition here? And it's pretty straightforward. If you want to do investment banking or management consulting, there's maybe 5 schools in the world that are the best entree to those. My particular path has been economic consulting. My degree from Wharton has opened a lot of doors. And to do what I've been doing, that's the place you needed to go, and it's worked really well for me. And so again, in terms of this value proposition and your path through it, there are in investment banking and management consulting certain schools that really are the best choice to give you the highest odds of moving that direction. But if you want to do something entrepreneurial, if you're interested in early stage finance, turns out BYU ranks in the top 3 in the country consistently year after year. If you want to do something in corporate finance or in the corporate realm, BYU is the #1 HR MBA in the world right now, according to the Financial Times. And so if you want to go into strategic HR and leadership development, this is the place to be. In marketing, we're one of about 5 schools that consistently place in brand management, which for a marketing student is the investment banking path. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that happen in the corporate realm that make this a great place to be. And if you look at our placement, it's all the same companies that the best schools place at. And then two things come into play. The tuition's low. Someone mentioned earlier this is the bargain tuition place. But the second thing is the network. If it matters to you to be a part of a network of people who really believe that faith and values are relevant to professional life, this is the place to come and pursue that career path with no limitations to your career possibilities, but the opportunity to be a part of an amazing network. This is the place to be. So, when you come in to interview for this school, I'm not going to try to talk you into it. There's certain career paths where you ought to go elsewhere. But there's other career paths where this may well be the best value proposition I'm aware of, and definitely worth considering. Now, we've got a little bit of time. I know you'd probably rather get out of here, but any questions that you'd like to ask about MBA paths? Yeah, venture capital, private equity. If you want to understand the startup process, business model, business plan, IP development into that, the funding of a company in the early stages, there are some of the best learning opportunities here, both conceptual and experiential, that I'm aware of at any university in the world. I mean, these guys have built something incredible. Yeah, if you'd like to do that post-MBA, really, Harvard, you're never going to get a better brand name. That's going to just open doors. If you want a great training, Wharton, NYU, Chicago have probably the best finance training you can get for that particular career path. Again, if you come to corporate finance, the corporate recruiters benchmark all of their hires. And our finance graduates are tied with Chicago for the best in terms of the percent that are designated high potential and for the best longevity and promotion track record. So for corporate, BYU and Chicago are neck and neck, but for investment banking, it's tough to beat Wharton or NYU, and then Chicago's got some really good outcomes as well. Mm-hmm. It varies. There are schools that have about 100 a year. We're sort of smaller, mid-size. We're 150, 160. Then there's a small number of schools that have between 700 and 900 a year. Yeah. So if you want to be, a part of a very big group, there are some places where you can do that. And if you like more of a sense of community where you know everyone, like a Cornell, Notre Dame, UT Austin, BYU, those are schools that tend to have more of a sense of community. Yeah. Also, Tuck at Dartmouth is very much a community-oriented school. There's something implicit in your question I want to come back to that just struck me. Investment banking is not the best way to get into an MBA program. It's not a bad way. But if you're saying, I did investment banking for a few years and realized it's not for me and now I want to do something else, all of a sudden you look wishy-washy and unfocused. So as good as investment banking is if you want to do investment banking, it may not be the best way to communicate that you want to do something else. So just be aware of that. Others? Irrelevant. Seriously, don't even think about an MBA. A PhD is a research degree, and the best training you can get for that is to take more economics, statistics, math. You do want to have enough exposure to business that you know which discipline is interesting enough to you to disappear into your room and do really, really intense research for years at a time and then hope that someone will publish it. And so if you don't know yet what you have enough passion about to study, you better get some exposure to the business world and find out where the questions are that are interesting to you. But you can get a lot of that just from your classes here and see which ones really light you up. It's kind of sad that it's irrelevant, but it's in the nature of it. Others? Anything else that would be of help? Let me just say, as someone who's been a finance professor here for a lot of years, you guys represent something we are excited about. We are so glad to have a finance major and a group of you that have enough passion in this area to come and be part of that major and to have you go out and represent us. You're going to be, in a sense, you're pioneering. You're going out and you're going to build relationships for us with companies. You're going to represent us. You're going to be the people who are going to mentor the students who will come along later. We are just really glad to have you doing what you're doing here at BYU with the opportunity to focus in finance and really go out and make a mark in this area. So it's a pleasure to get a chance to come and visit with you. And I hope you have a great day.